everyone. Thank you for coming to our talk. My name's Maize and this is Jason. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the land that we're meeting on and where we work as well. So we're here on the Wurundjeri country, and our studio Ghost Pattern, who are making way with Strand, is on Bunurong country, both of which are part of the Kulin Nations. I want to acknowledge their elders past and present, and that we're on land that was never ceded. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Once we engage in truth-telling, we can add our history to the 60,000 years at least that's been here before us and move together united. So, what is a cooperative? I think most of you are here to get our take on that. So, a little bit of history of Ghost Pattern. We started off as a company and are now moving towards a co-op structure instead. So what's different for us, or our highlights of what this will allow us, is that a co-op is democratic. Each member gets one vote. It's owned by all of the members, instead of just having a CEO and then everyone else. And it's focused on benefiting all the members. In a co-op, you define your member responsibilities up front, and we'll go through how to construct your rules and what you might put into a constitution as well as what the benefits to the members will be. So, as defined by the International Cooperative Association, co-ops have a few core values. Some of the ones that get us really excited, our highlights, is that co-ops really push the need for internal education and training, as well as external. So it's part of engaging in your community and really playing out your values of bringing everyone up at once. And it's not only just for general upskilling, but it's so that the members can make informed choices when they vote. So gone will be the days where the CEO is doing something behind closed doors and no one knows that they're all about to lose their jobs. We're making these conversations together instead. The co-op community is really strong as well, and part of that is because one of the core tenets is cooperation amongst cooperatives, which is again a little bit different to your traditional company, where we're often directly just competing. And that is pretty core to capitalism working. For us, we're really trying to get everyone up together and have that sense of solidarity. So that concern for community is really a huge part of why you might consider starting a co-op or transitioning from a company structure to a co-op. So some misconceptions about cooperatives. Ghost Pattern, we are for profit. We're a games studio, we're hoping to make enough money to make the next game. Pretty usual business. In a cooperative, everyone has to take on equal responsibility for everything. Not true. So again, the members can vote on who might be responsible for different things and take charge of their different areas. In games, we all have different disciplines that we're experts in. Everyone always earns the same amount of profit. Again, the point of cooperatives is that you are earning from the value that you've put in. So if someone else is working hundreds more hours than you are, they'll get more of the pullback as well. Cooperatives do have an ABN. There is the business just like everyone else. That's it. Cooperatives do scale. So the biggest well-known cooperative in the world is Mondragon, or Mondragon. I'm yet to decide which one I like saying better. It's Dragon. Who are in Spain, and they have 75,000 employees. So yes, you can be as big as EA and be a cooperative. Many of the biggest co-ops are banks, credit unions, agriculture, or large retail grocery chains. a lot of us are a member of co-ops, even if you haven't acknowledged it yet. We'll get to that.
Cool. So, like, I'm going to talk a bit about, like, why would you form a cooperative? And this kind of goes along with, I guess, Ghost Pattern's journey, because we started out, like, came together to make Wayward Strand, and we were, it felt like we were kind of, like, funneled into, well, you have to make a company, you have to set things up in this way. And just over time, especially as we brought more people on, it started feeling like we had to be constantly like fighting against the structures of like companies and structures of capitalism, and all of these like kind of intense hierarchies. So like we felt that like as we learned about cooperatives, we felt like the structure really suits indie game development generally. Like in indie games, you're often like all coming together to cooperate over a thing. Like you don't necessarily have like a really intense hierarchical structure when you're like all coming together like a bunch of friends to make a game. So why not have a structure that reflects that? Within a cooperative structure, people joining and leaving the team is a bit easier, I think, than it is at a company. And also, it's easier to have kind of like different levels of like membership or different amounts of like responsibility within the cooperative. Like you could have a membership level that is like, and we could potentially go in this direction, like a membership level of this is like an active currently working team member versus this is somebody that has like collaborated in the past, but they might still be able to be a member of the cooperative and have a say in what the cooperative does, because they have been a part of making Wayward Strand, for instance. Yeah, and ownership is shared amongst all team members, including newer team members, which is like a great thing to have as a default, as opposed to as a default in a company. A new team member comes on as an employee and they have like no ownership, unless you like in a company you have to like actively give that person shares, and in most companies that doesn't really happen off the bat. And yeah, profits are basically shared by default, and by default they are shared equally, but then you can then kind of customize from there. But at the same time, that is also such a better starting place to be working from. Like, let's go from everybody earns the same amount of profits, and then let's move, like, figure out where we go to from there, as opposed to in a company, the default is the directors of the company earn all of the profits and everybody else earns zero profits. All right, where do we go to from there? And the last thing is that it's cheaper than starting a company, which is great for indies, because it doesn't include accounting fees necessarily, either of these numbers, but it's significantly cheaper, especially to keep a co-op going year over year, and you've got your ABN and stuff which you need, and so it's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm just going to have 2 slides that has some like Marx related stuff in it. This is like a kind of complex theory that I'm just going to give a really basic overview of. But the basic idea is, which I think a lot of us would agree with, is that like a game, like the value of something, like the value of the game that we make is created by the work that goes into it. So the workers like do labor, that labor goes into the game now has value, the game can be sold and then create like profit. Like, and therefore a particular worker is the value that they have put into it is their labor divided by all of the labor, and that is that worker's value. Therefore, that worker's value, like when the game is, like when they're working, they should get their wage, which allows them to like live and survive and eat and feed their family. But they should also receive basically their percentage of the pie of whatever profit the game creates. Because the value that is going into the game isn't coming from anything else other than the worker's labor. Like there's, and so a cooperative like works basically within that fundamental idea, because every worker, like in a worker cooperative, every worker shares that ownership of the cooperative and therefore shares the profits. And that doesn't necessarily mean that as soon as profits come in, it goes straight into your bank account, but it means that you control what happens with those profits based on your vote amongst, like, within a democratic system. And like democracies are pretty good. I'm pretty sure most of us like democracy. And yeah, and so this system can still allow for like investment and capital investment and stuff, but under this theory, under the labor theory of value, it shouldn't be ideally that an investor receives a percentage of profit because they have allowed labor to be done, like to create the product. Like they've unlocked the fact that that labor can be done, but they haven't actually created value with that investment. So they can get, you know, a fixed rate of return on that investment potentially, but yeah, at the moment, like it seems like in companies generally at the moment, it's 100% the opposite, where investors get all of the profit, even though they don't have to do any of the labor. And that just doesn't really make sense from that perspective. Yeah. And then, yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, you know, this isn't, even though I'm talking about like theory and labor theory and Marx and stuff, this isn't a pipe dream. Like there are like heaps of cooperatives within games around the world already. And like there's co-op mode in Montreal and Dead Cells in France and the Glory Society and Pixel Pushes and like Tail Spinners, which I'm pretty sure is mainly based out of the UK. And they're an interesting example because they're a cooperative that doesn't necessarily fully create their own games, but they're a cooperative of like writers and narrative designers that then kind of contract out to work on other games. So you don't necessarily have to have a cooperative that's just to create a particular game.
Okay, so getting started. Just like any business, the strong foundations take some organising, but these are the things that are generally accepted that will really help your co-op keep going after those first few years. One, a strong business plan. And even if that is to say, look, we're just going to keep working and we'll revisit the business plan at some point, which is especially the case when you're amongst friends. Maybe you just need a bit of a contract to be like, nothing's happening with this game until we talk about it. We've all been in that situation where we haven't quite got that contract down early enough. We'll talk about your member structure. So what directors you might have, or whether, yeah, just what roles everyone might have in the co-op. Your constitution. So the next slide is a bit more about the constitution, so I'll skip that one. Your other stakeholders. So just like a business, how will you interact with your general community, your financiers, your suppliers, regulators, any lawyers or accountants. So just making sure that you know how you're going to deal with that. The great thing about co-ops is that there is such a huge international community, and with that very steadfast value of lifting everyone up. No one is hiding their awesome lawyer or their awesome accountant or any resources. Everyone's really trying to spread that load. Yeah. We're also looking at your registration. So how does someone become a member of the co-op? Is that like through a voting process? When might they come in? Is it when work comes up? That sort of thing. How will you call out for members as well? Okay, so this is my favourite bit, the Constitution. This is where you get to put all of your values in. So already the core values of a cooperative are pretty awesome, and it's something that we all really wish that we could act out in a world that sometimes feels like is falling apart around us, and this makes it a lot easier. So the rules that you want to cover in a constitution on the minimum is the purpose of the co-op and the benefits to members. So is the co-op a service, like that writers one, or are you making a game? What sort of thing is it, and what will the members get out of it? How members are joining and leaving, how that's handled. It's really great that that is just such an easily, this is how it's going to be done, rather than in companies where you have to deal with all of their baggage. Requirements of members, so how actively should they be engaged, or how inactively are they allowed to get your shares, so how are you going to distribute those profits? And then other ways or values that the co-op might demonstrate. So for me, something I care about is entry-level jobs existing in games. So we could put into the constitution that the co-op can't get above a certain amount before we have an actual junior job where the person doesn't need experience. Or maybe you want to tackle ageism a bit in how you run your business. So maybe you want to make sure that you have a proper spread of people who are above 50 to below 25, Yeah, I think this is my favourite part because we get to be like, well, it's in the rules. We need to, we need to hire someone who demonstrates these things. And then the directors do management of the co-op. So as I said before, what's really great is that this is elected by the general membership. So you can have someone that demonstrates the values of how you want them to run business or do admin, that sort of thing, and still keep them checked by the members. As I said before, personally pretty sick of people who deal with the business money or where the business is going to go or what values we hold, making all of those decisions behind closed doors and then telling us afterward. Especially in Melbourne and in Australia, a lot of businesses are coming out of recent graduates or people who have recently quit their full-time job to make a game, and they don't have all of the expertise. So why should we put all of that responsibility on them? Yeah. So in Australia, as I said before, there's a lot of us who are in co-ops. They're often banks, so you might be part of Bank of Australia, which is a mutual. You might be a part of a super fund, which is also a mutual, something like that. Your local grocery store might be a co-op. So often there's those sort of consumer-owned co-ops. But in Australia, there are not many game development studios yet. And hopefully everyone here is going to make a co-op and we're going to be an awesome community. But yeah, worker co-ops can make a whole lot of different forms, from creating whole games to providing services. So for me, my field is usually in game audio. So usually I'm on the sort of service end, or operating as artist collectives, which is pretty big in Melbourne. There's quite a few artist collectives. And it can make it easier for when someone does give a collective money to put on something, or if you want to apply for funding and you do need that ABN or something like that, this is a really nice, solid set of values to start off with.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we have had a bit of trouble with, like particularly in Australia with actually setting up a co-op, or also some of the things that we've kind of identified as limitations are more like potential limitations. Like we don't know if they are going to be roadblocks for us, but we've done research and gotten like a consultation to see if there are ways around it. The first one, which is a bit annoying, is that in Australia currently to register a co-op, you need to have 5 members. And that's potentially a lot more than a lot of indie teams start out with. Like, you know, you might start out with 2 or 3. So there's a way to get around that where you can apply kind of saying that you are planning to grow the co-op, but apparently that's quite a successful way if you are actually planning to grow up to or beyond 5 members. You can also have members of a co-op that aren't necessarily members of like the core team that's actually like working on the game itself. Like you could have silent partners or people that are related to the group in some way, and their style of membership can reflect that. And you may be able to apply like for an exemption with your registration, and that's what we might do when we go for it. Yeah, so that's one thing that's currently a bit of an annoying limitation. The other one, and this is the one that we're not sure about, is when you're interfacing with larger like international companies, we're not sure if like they will be able to interface properly with like an Australian co-op as compared, like they might just be set up to interface with a proprietary limited company or whatever. And yeah, we're not sure about it yet, but based on our some help that we've gotten from Co-ops New South Wales, which is part of that co-op community help thing, we kind of have figured out, sorry for the resolution, but we've figured out like a structure where you could basically bypass that limitation. So this is, yeah, just a thing that I made, but basically the co-op could potentially fully own a company. So you could have a company and a co-op, but the co-op fully owns the company, so makes all of the decisions, and the company can interface with businesses or organizations that aren't co-op friendly, while the co-op does with businesses that are co-op friendly. And then you also have to figure out, this is getting kind of into the legal area, but you have to figure out where your like IP ownership is. So you could have it so that your co-op actually owns the IP, but then the company has an exclusive license to use it, which I'm fairly confident, like, or based on our discussions, I think that would mean that whatever other businesses that aren't co-op friendly would be fine with that arrangement. Yeah, and all of this said, like, we're not like lawyers or accountants. This is just based on our research and what we're looking into at the moment. But there are things that you can do like this, and this is a little bit more overhead and a little bit more cost. But if you're at the point where you're going to be like signing a deal with some big international company, you can probably afford like the extra like 50, 40 bucks a month or whatever that you need. Yeah, I mean, maybe as just like a conclusion, it just feels like game teams are very like collaborative and cooperative, like especially indie game teams. And then also like the industry, it feels like there is a lot of like a vibe in the industry for us all to be like collaborating and working together and lifting each other up and stuff. But like, at least for us, when we went to create a company, it felt like so many things within creating a company and running a company were like counter to that drive. So why not kind of look at alternative structures that seem to actually match what all of our vibe is and what all of our goals are. Yeah.
We'd like to open up to questions. You're quite a big group, so we didn't have questions all through, but these are our favourite resources, and the Game Workers Unite talk is tomorrow at 2 p.m, and they are very into the co-op scene as well, so yeah, definitely look for them.
So I'm working on a game that is pretty much fully planned out. How, so is Webwood Strand a co-op?
Very soon. So some of those little legal things we're still ironing out, but yeah.
I guess what I'm wanting to tease out is how you structure. I used to work in the public service, so I'm used to a very hierarchical, very strongly organised structure. And so I'm interested in how you manage the project management and tasks in a cooperative of, I guess, balancing the expectations of, on the one hand, self-determination with actually the project management of getting a game finished and released.
Yeah, well, producer.
Well, so within a cooperative, you can, like, as you, like, elect directors and whatever, you can also elect, like, people to, like, manage particular things, or be producers, or be, like, directors of particular things, elements of the game. It just means that your default place that you're starting from is that these people are being chosen by the group, as opposed to the default being that there's this kind of like master authority at the top that is deciding everything. So yeah, you can have as much or as little hierarchy as you want. It just means that those people are accountable to the rest of the team, as opposed to, I guess, having a kind of like ultimate authority. Yeah.
Or the shareholders.
Yeah, yeah.
I think right at the back was the next
Ah,
highlight.
yeah, cool.
Hello.
It was interesting how you mentioned the kind of, it seems to me like a loophole with University of New South Wales Co-op, about like making essentially like a shell company to interface with companies that may not necessarily be agreeable with co-ops. Would that mean like you'd have to have pay the fees to run the co-op as well as pay the fees to run the company on top of that?
Yes, yeah, you would need to. But I guess as I was kind of mentioning there, if you were at that point, the additional fees would be about like 40 or 50 bucks a month or so, I think, or maybe less. And if like once you're getting to that point and you're interfacing with these large international companies, it might be because you've got a deal for like hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever, so that hopefully wouldn't be too much of an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, we have found that most people are just happy with an ABN, or even like when we were talking to Film Vic, who we've got a lot of support from, they were just like, let's take that word out of, proprietary limited. We didn't know what that actually meant, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Purple.
For those of us who already have businesses that we already have dealing with other companies and stuff like
Yeah.
that, what would you say is just a general outline of the pathway to, like, can you turn a company that already exists into a co-op? Or is
Yeah,
it
that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you give an overview of like what that might look like, just very general terms?
So technically you are creating a new entity when you create the co-op, but like I think, especially to transition across, maybe the structure that I had on that other slide would actually be a good way to do it, where to transition it, you transfer the ownership of the company from whichever shareholders to the co-op, and then you would basically be running both of those in parallel, and then you can, if you want to, transfer the actual game IP across to the co-op itself. Yeah, but we are going through the process and we're figuring it out as well, and so like it'd be cool to chat further, and we kind of, we're all in this together to try to figure out how to do this cool thing.
Yeah, and like some of the contracts that I've done just as a sole proprietor, transferring from like my ABN to someone else's ABN. It's not that unheard of, you know, especially the higher up, sort of more money you're dealing with, the more people are swapping companies around and moving those large amounts of money around, as rich people do. Yeah, so it's what seems like a lot to us, actually, people are pretty chill with. Yeah. Behind?
It seems like this is super cool and I really want to do it, but what would you then do if, say, your co-op was taking on multiple projects which were all quite separate from one another? Like you talked about how like you can still employ those hierarchical structures, it's just, you know, each level is completely accountable to everyone around them. So hypothetically, if you know, one group's working on a game, but another group is working on marketing for that game, but then kind of gets outsourced to another group, you know, how does profit share and all that stuff happen then?
Like, well, it's probably a two-part answer. Part of it is just establishing what shape your co-op actually is. So is everyone in the co-op trying to get everyone to work to all sort of make this successful business? In which case maybe you would want to structure it so that everyone is getting like their hours of profit share, and regardless of which project it is. Or, you know, because because co-ops are trying to be really open about their rules and really open about all of these conversations, maybe you can be like, okay, the profit from here goes to there and the profit from there goes to here, and that sort of stuff. It's really up to you in the discussion, which is what's great, is that you can just discuss things and change things and vote on things as you like. Yeah, it's no closed doors. Nothing is unbroachable, you know?
Yeah, so I guess taking on that, if you had a collective of people in a co-op and you took on, you essentially worked as a co-op doing freelance work, you almost take on the nature of, you know, whoever in the co-op works on this project gets paid hours on that project.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, like, you know, maybe if one project paid a lot and you did do the Marxist thing where, you know, these people's hours are getting that part, then maybe it might become a bit uneven, you know, because this contract is really huge and this one's smaller, or something like that.
But I suppose then it's about inviting other people, like if it's paying more, then potentially you need more people anyway, and just opening up to more people within the co-op.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, you can look at the product in different ways, as in, like, you can kind of see all of the activities of the co-op as the product, or as the thing that has value. So like, if you're a team that really is focused on the individual games, then you could set it up in that, like, maybe a bit more complicated way where exact value from this game is going to the exact team. But if you see it as more of like a holistic thing, then maybe just value is coming into the company and it's getting into the co-op, and it's getting shared amongst the members.
It's probably what our vibe, but
Yeah.
go for it.
You mentioned that some companies aren't co-op friendly. What are some reasons why,
Oops, sorry.
why that is?
It's probably like just unaware most of the time. It might be some just a little bit less paperwork for them.
Yeah, I think like there's just because a lot of things happen now, like automated online, maybe they've just set up a particular online form where it just doesn't allow, like, you have to put PTY Ltd there, or you have to, there's like some limitation or some number that you need to get that for some reason you can't get with a co-op. I think a lot of it isn't necessarily that they don't want to work with co-ops, it's just that because especially in games, co-ops are a bit of like a newer thing. Maybe they haven't fully set up their systems yet to handle it.
What are the limitations or issues why you can't run could you try to run a company like a co-op and just go like, that's inside, we run it like a co-op, or is it really tax time and
there's just so much more you need to change to get across
What if you
these
took
values.
all the rules of a co-op and went,
Yeah.
we'll register for a business, but really behind the doors, no one's a director and, or, you know.
Yeah.
Well, there is, I think there are some companies that are set up in that way where they've basically done that process. It is kind of taking this structure that isn't meant to do a particular thing and like forcing it in a particular direction. And the weird thing, I guess, about it is that even if you do that, it can then get changed back at any time. Whereas if you actually, like, it can be changed back just depending on the majority shareholders or whatever. Whereas with a co-op, it's like, it's just set in stone, that democratic thing. Like you can't, no matter how many like shares somebody has or how much whatever, you can't get away from one person, one vote.
And I mean, especially on Jason's side, has had a lot of trouble dealing with lawyers trying to force that co-op stuff into the contracts. Even trying to get equal revenue share across different workers and having it reflect their hours. You're telling me you actually had to write it yourself because the lawyer couldn't.
Yeah, like that's the weird thing is when you create a company and you're kind of working with like lawyers or whatever, they'll often just assume that you're putting in something into a contract that is going to be good for the workers as like a way to trick them into working for free or something. Like, I think that's one of the things where we really started to realize maybe this entire structure, we need to find something else. And I think if we were going to like lawyers as a co-op, that is just inbuilt into the conversation.
What are the challenges or limitations on having international?
So that's actually pretty set up. So similar to how unions work. Hello. All of the different countries' large co-op bodies have the International Co-op Alliance as well, which they're a part of. So they can all talk together through that, which is also how unions work. And some unions, very off topic, that's tomorrow. Yeah, so your co-op can be registered in a particular country, like how a company does. But yeah, if you're working across different co-ops from different countries, they all go through the sort of one body.
Yeah, sure. Do you still run into the minimum 5 members limitation within a particular country?
No. So some countries actually have minimum 20 members because they're super used to agriculture and stuff. And then some countries don't have a minimum. They've just not, that rule hasn't needed to be a thing for them. I think, yeah, behind you.
I was just curious about, like you say, it's obviously a business structure. Are you still bound by similar rules with, like, you know, super contributions and things like that?
Fully.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
is a member the equivalent of an employee in the same that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Ish. Yeah.
I was a bit confused because you were using the term members, and it sounds like if you agree to a certain thing,
Yeah.
it might make things different.
Like a member is technically different from an employee, but like you could have it that every member is an employee. It's they're not exactly the same thing, but
Yeah.
you would probably want to do that so that
I assume people that, you know, would encourage something like a co-op would be, you know,
yeah, exactly.
pro paying super? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think especially in the last, this financial year, this superannuation in particular, the laws have gotten a lot more strict where a lot more people are legally entitled to super, especially contractors. It used to be how, well, if we put it in the invoice, then they have to pay it, or and people didn't want to put it in their invoice and stuff, but now it's a legal requirement that if you're paying someone over $420 a month, which is pretty easy, you have to pay their super. Union talk is tomorrow. Yeah, it's up here.
Yeah, would this be a good model
10 minutes. I think, like a business, like a company, you still have to choose one country for it to be registered in. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I don't see
I
why
would
it
say
would
it
be
would
bad.
be pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many co-ops that do run in that fashion?
I think that writer one is mostly in the UK, but not all in the UK.
Yeah.
There's also there's a large freelancer co-op, which is also based out of the UK, but has people from all different countries.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, registered in the UK. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Around profit distribution, how do you go about assigning a value to a person's work if everyone's working full time?
Yeah. So
Seniority, is it experience? How do you determine the contributions, especially with, let's say, admin staff or marketing staff? How do you determine this is your value to the project?
So, like, I think in a co-op, you basically, like, you would start from the place that everybody is paid the same. And then it just becomes a discussion for the group to then democratically vote on. So if the group believes that based on seniority, there should be like a particular extra percentage, or based on a particular role, there should be an extra percentage, or like whichever way you would want to do it. And that's the same as like how you deal with like investment, or like if you're an indie team starting out, how you deal with people, you know, potentially, you know, if you create a company, often the directors are initially working for free. So then how do you deal with like that in terms of a co-op? It just means that like you're starting from this place where it's all fully shared equally, and then you can change that up just as the group collectively believes is the best way to do it.
I think which especially helps for people who are transitioning into different careers, and it's really hard to define what seniority is, starting from that place of equalness really helps with that discussion. Yeah.
Around liability and bankruptcy.
I was looking at this last night. I think it's basically similar to a proprietary limited thing. So you have like a limited liability as a co-op member. Yeah, I think it's very similar to a proprietary limited company. And yeah, I think it is just similarly. I can't remember if it's based on shares or if it's based on just membership. That might even be something that you can kind of like customize as well, because the constitution seems pretty customizable.
I guess it's like maybe jumping kind of deeper into this, looking at super details, but I'm really curious about this idea of member levels and voting, and what it would mean if you were, say, a group of 5 people in co-op, and then a really big client come up and you quickly got a bunch of contractors and bought one.
Yeah.
And suddenly you have this question of company and culture and value, where the team member size might double, triples, and then people who, you know, they might not really understand how co-ops work. How would you approach that kind of situation, or other things that maybe built into co-ops to help with that type of thing?
Yeah, so a co-op can still like work with contractors in the same way that a company does. So you could, if you were in that situation, be just bringing people on like for a fixed term as like a contractor if you wanted to. A lot of co-ops, and in the talk that's linked there with Salim Debus from Co-op Mode, he discusses how they have a like probationary period for people who are joining the co-op of I think it's like 6 months or so, and then kind of at the end of that 6 months they decide whether to become like a full member of the co-op or not or whatever. So because it is a bit of a new concept, you even want to be like easing people into it and letting them come to some of the co-op meetings without necessarily having all of the responsibility on them yet straight away. So yeah, I think there'd be a few ways to try to resolve that situation. Yeah.
We got 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
How would, have you guys looked into, let's say, a VC fund that wanted to invest in a company but necessarily publish the product? So typically they would buy shares. Have you looked at how that would work?
Right. Yeah. Well, like in a co-op, you can, like, there are, like, capital investment, like, is allowed into the co-op. And actually, like, technically, in a co-op, you can still set up the capitalistic kind of thing where somebody kind of comes in and buys, or a company comes in, buys a bunch of shares, and then they are eligible for that percentage of the profit. But the good thing about a co-op is no matter how many shares that VC bought, they would either have, like, they would only have one vote if that VC became a member of the co-op. So in a company, if you bring in a VC and they buy up a heap of shares, then now suddenly they have control over everything, because in a company it's based on your percentage of the shares for how many votes you have, how much control you have. In a co-op, that VC, regardless of how much money they're pumping into it, they get one vote on what's going on along with every team member.
Just at the first link for New South Wales Co-op, they have a huge reference, which is all online, but the book is much easier to navigate. And it's all in really, really plain English, so some of these questions are actually just chapter titles in this. So definitely have a look at that, and yeah, there's some really, really great resources. I think we're done.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Thanks.